Welcome to a football show Thursday edition. Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I am Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Ran Carthon has been fired as the general manager of the Tennessee Titans. Chad Brinker has been given complete and total control of the organization, I guess. We'll see. Nick, I want to ask you what happened, what you think happened. I will tell you what I think happened, and I will tell you what I think it tells us about the organization moving forward, and what are the right questions to be asking about all the people still in place, which there are plenty moving forward. So lots of stuff to do. And oh, by the way, the college football playoff is back tonight and tomorrow. We get 5 straight days, 5 straight nights, Nick, of playoff football. No time for Squid Game, all playoff football for the next 5 nights. How are you, sir?
I am good. I've told you this before, and I will tell you again. We've been doing this show for roughly 6 months, and I still do not remember what the words of those theme songs are. And I still, every time we start the show, I'm trying to listen to your intro, and I'm just parsing through my head, what is Moon Taxi saying there? I believe
it's stand up, fight back, I believe.
Okay. And I will not remember. You've told me that before. I still will not remember it. This is what people want to hear about today.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Moon Taxi lyrics from a record published eight years ago. That's what people want to hear about. Nothing to do with the dynamics inside the palace walls at St. Thomas Sports Park. Not at all what they want to hear. We'll try to tell you exactly what we think happened. And here's the thing, Nick, I enjoy the palace intrigue probably more than ball in general, because it's about people, it's about humans. And also when it comes to our content, or at least in my career, I've been on the air live for the unfolding of the COVID pandemic in March of 2020, when there was a night where Rudy Gobert tested positive, and Tom Hanks got the Rona, and Fred Hoiberg's a basketball coach at Nebraska, and he's being removed from a basketball game to go to the hospital, and everyone thought, oh, is Fred Hoiberg going to die? But the point I'm bringing up is you have to get it right. Yeah, you have to get it right, and I really enjoy the opportunities to try to paint as accurate a picture as we can, and do the best job possible to be as accurate as possible. And I relish those opportunities, because when it's about humans, Nick, it's almost impossible to get it exactly right. It's easy for us to look at ball, and the tape don't lie. Player X produced, player Y did not. Coach produced, coach did not. And it's so much easier to sort of analyze that. I find this to be so much more interesting on a human level. It's probably why Game of Thrones was such a popular show. But it's hard to get it right, but we're going to do our best job to try to get it as right as possible this morning. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I've been telling people all week that my mind was ready for this, because when we were in, what was the last road trip of the year? Jacksonville. When we were in Jacksonville, I spent that entire trip 13 hours just listening to the Jay Leno versus Conan O'Brien audiobook. So my head has been nothing but palace intrigue the entire time.
Oh, you were ready.
How backroom deals have been made. So yeah, let's talk about it. I prefer what happens on the field. I will come out and say I like football more than I like boardroom dynamics.
Well, okay, so let's talk about it. I like watching the games more than anything.
I don't believe you. I think you like contracts.
I enjoy this. I can't wait for 5 straight nights of playoff football. Seriously, it's going to be awesome. I know that we thought when the college schedule came out and it was Thursday and Friday, we're like, oh, that's a little weird playing a football game on a Thursday. But we get 3 NFL nights. We get 2 college football games. I like the games more as just a person who loves sports. If you're talking about what I'm covering, I like the complex stuff. I like the interesting, difficult, dynamic stuff, because it puts more pressure on you to do a better job. And I just enjoy that. So I relish the opportunity, and hopefully we'll do the best job we can today, because I think there's a lot of competing narratives about what has happened. And it's very obvious to figure out sort of the competing factors that were existing inside the walls of the Titans organization. And I think there's tons of very fair criticisms. I think there's some that are inaccurate. And I'll try to explain why I think that is. And Nick, you can tell me if you think I'm crazy or not. Ed Henry says, I came for your review of a complete unknown. Let me say this, because Nick's a big screen guy.
I've seen some screens.
It might be the best biopic I've ever seen.
Really? Better than Dewey Cox?
You know what's so funny about you saying that is when we were it was me and 3 other millennial dads at New Year's Eve asking what's the best biopic we've ever seen. And I like Johnny Cash. I like Ray Charles. I thought Queen was okay. Somebody brought up Dewey Cox as objectively a brilliant biopic. I don't think it counts. I don't think it counts. It's great. It was great, Ed. I think everybody should go. Okay, so Eddie and Donnie, anyone else that wants to get into the comments, please share the product, retweet it, thumbs up, all that good stuff. I want to get some folks in here so we can have a conversation here. So first, I'm going to ask you, what do you in your sort of like very linear, factual approach to all of this?
Yes.
What happened in your mind over the last week?
A punitive response to a 3-14 season. That is what I believe happened. I think that obviously there are 2 years worth of factors that led up to this. I think that we can talk about core competency versus decision making that doesn't work out, good decisions, bad results versus bad decisions, good results, all this stuff. We can talk about core competency all we want. But I think that the recent track record of the Tennessee Titans has borne out the fact that when something bad happens, somebody gets punished for it. And decisions are not necessarily made with the thought process of, let's do something so we can get better. They tend to be made in a, let's do something so it's not this bad again kind of way. And so I'm not saying that there was a scapegoat. I'm not saying that anybody was the fall guy. But I am saying when you finish 3-14 and you earn the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, there is a punitive decision made. And I feel like Ran was the link of, is punitivity a word? Did I just make that up?
Sure. Put it in a column. Ask your editor if that's the one you're allowed to use.
I believe that end of the day, we can get to the tentacles, we can get to all of the stuff that branches off. But what happened is that the decisions made over the last 2 years, and more specifically over the last 12 months, led to this team finishing 3-14. And the decision was made that somebody had to be punished for it. That is a very, very broad answer.
Yeah.
But that is my belief of what happened.
So, and I don't necessarily disagree with you on that at all. I do believe in Occam's razor as a general principle to things that happen in the world. And I think that I think what's been lost in the conversation about Amy Adams-Strunk and the entire organization being dysfunctional, or the power struggle between Chad Brinker and Ran Carthon, or the power struggle between Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel, or whatever, who's making final decisions in year 1 versus year 2 versus the future, the promotions and the press releases and the commentary. And I think lost in all of that is that I don't think Ran Carthon did a very good job.
Fair.
And that's it. I don't think he's incapable of being a good general manager one day. I think it's widely agreed upon that the inexperience was that he was in over his head coming in. That's from the Vrabel side of things last year. So you got to consider the source there. But I don't think you can point to much that he did that was good for the organization.
Sure.
In terms of results. I'm not talking about like people or kindness or morality. I'm talking about just like on the field results. And a lot of folks, even in that conversation, Nick, what I find maddening is the who has final say thing, which was such a big part of the Vrabel thing with him and Vrabel. And it's like, you can't use one side of this and say all his decisions were terrible and then come back and say, well, but he had no power. And then you can't say, well, all of the decisions were terrible, but they were Chad Brinkers. Like it's almost impossible to do that. I think it's so much simpler than that, which is someone didn't do a great job at what they were supposed to do. He progressively lost power. Another person who we don't know may or may not be great at the job. We have no idea if Chad Brinker is great at this or not. Asserted himself throughout the course of this process and gained the trust of the organization. And that's it. That's the simplest explanation of this on the surface. That's the simplest explanation, which, by the way, happens at every position on the field for every player in the NFL. If you're not doing your job and someone else behind you is good at it, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah, nobody accused Luke Gifford of scheming for Otis Reese's job. It was just like, Luke Gifford made a lot of tackles. Like that is that is a simple answer. We are not saying that is conclusively the only reason this happened. But we can all be adults here, unless you're 14 and watching this, in which case go to school. But we can all be adults here and acknowledge a lot of this just comes down to the fact that the Titans weren't very good. That's not all of it, but a lot of it.
Yeah. And again, like, isn't that how all of us function? Not necessarily like in an evil way. Like, we're not all walking around trying to stab each other in the back in the world. And I'm not even suggesting that's what happened, but like, aren't all of us trying to self-promote and become successful? Like, that's just sort of the way the world works. It especially works in the NFL, where it is a total meritocracy at all times. Every coordinator wants to be a head coach. Most of them. Every backup wants to be a starter. Every assistant GM wants to be a GM. Like, that's just what this is. So I don't fault people for having motivation.
Right.
I do think this is also important. I think one of the things that's been frustrating to me, and I know a lot of you may have disagreed with anything I posted on Twitter, but Twitter is not a smart place to have this conversation. Twitter is too short-sighted. It doesn't have nuance. It doesn't have context. It doesn't allow for longer conversations. Like, I can say I don't think Rand did a good job as a general manager, and then on this show turn around and with different voice inflection say it doesn't mean he's not going to be a good GM at one point in his life. Like, he could go on to be a very good GM someday. I don't know. Like, that's not what I'm not saying he's some terrible, awful person here. Like, that's not what anybody should be saying, at least. The other thing is you can separate the decision to remove Ran Carthon from the organization with the overarching dysfunction or disconnect or concerns about decision-making with the organization itself. Mm-hmm. I can say that Amy Adams-Strunk, that we should be asking questions about the people around Amy Adams-Strunk who are giving her football advice, her football decisions. We can certainly criticize the processes dating all the way back to Malarkey, getting Malarkey fired and hiring Vrabel, which is a great outcome for the organization, a complicated process. Malarkey, not happy.
Yeah.
Well, Malarkey had to fake a report about a contract extension to a national reporter. So we can have a smart conversation about the concerns we have with ownership and the decision-making at the top of the organization, and separate that from what might be a very difficult but very smart decision to remove someone who may not be doing a good job. Those can be mutually exclusive things. This could be a good decision for the organization. Again,
yeah.
If you believe he didn't do a good job, it's a good decision to remove that person from the role. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. It doesn't change the fact that I have questions about their decision-making at the top of the organization.
It's all so messy. And again, we've all heard stuff. Even probably people listening have heard things from people who've heard things from people who've heard things. Like,
yep.
The complicated situation here is that you got to trust who you trust. And what I believe is that the Titans did not have a good plan after firing J-Rob. That doesn't mean that it couldn't have worked, because things can work if it's a bad plan. But it's not that it was a bad decision to do that. It's that I don't think they made good decisions after doing that.
Totally agree.
And that is not to say that Ran was a bad decision. Like, again, I'm talking myself in circles to couch this statement, but like, the fact is this organization just needs to go back to what I was saying earlier about punitive versus planning. Like, what is happening to this organization seems to always be something bad happened. Who do we blame? Not something bad happened.
Look inward.
What can we do to fix it? What can we do to move forward?
Yep.
And I do think that the message that Brinker has peddled on the record these last 2 days has been
peddling hard, by the way.
has been the kind of thing that you do want an organization to say. Now, it's not all that different from the things past organizations have said. It's not like there are any general managers that come out and say, you know what, screw the draft. We're not going to draft anybody. And you know what, screw free agency. We're just going to pick people up off the street. That's what we're going to do.
I'd like
53 Vince Papalis. That's what we're doing here.
I'd like to build through the practice squad.
Yeah. Like,
no.
The fact that there is a vision and the fact that there is somebody in charge who is willing to outline a vision, good. I commend that. But like, guys, all I'm saying here is that if what they have said on the record is truly the case, which is that Amy's goal in moving on from J-Rob was to have a new kind of roster building, was to have somebody who thought differently and thought outside of the box about roster building, to work alongside a coach in Mike Vrabel who thought very differently about the way that you win in the NFL. I understand that, But when you have two guys who choose to think differently, but they don't think the same kind of different, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So that, to me, it all goes back to, well, what the heck decision did we think was being made? And it's all that to me. Like, we can talk about the individuals and the reports and all that stuff, but it didn't work because it might have been a bad idea to begin with.
That to me is the original sin. And I think you can add and I think it gets boiled down too quickly to their original sin was to hire Ran Carthon. That's not necessarily what I mean. I think it's more along what you said, which is they fired John Robinson, by all accounts, for the exact same reasons they fired Ran Carthon. 2.5 years of bad decisions and not good decisions. And I think I've already seen some people in the comments saying outwardly Ran's record is, let me make sure I get this correct here. Like, outwardly Ran's record was very good. Eddie said this, but Ran's outward record was solid. And I think what we can say about that is individual decisions were not criticized at the time because most people thought, including myself, that they were smart moves. Going to trade for L'Jarius Sneed. Turns out Chad Brinker was doing all the negotiating on that. All these moves, trading for DeAndre Hopkins, acquiring Ernest Jones, signing Tony Pollard and Lloyd Cushenberry, all smart moves on paper at the time. Very few of any of those moves have paid off for the organization.
Yeah.
And that's not even fair necessarily, but it's just the facts. Yeah. The facts are L'Jarius Sneed, the trade, giving a 3rd-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed, has not worked. It might work next year. Chidobe Awuzie contract did not work. Calvin Ridley's contract worked. Tony Pollard's contract worked. Lloyd Cushenberry's contract did not work. Right now, the 2 drafts that Ran is tied to, and we don't know specifically how much he pulled the trigger, but he had some control of the first draft where they traded up to draft a quarterback who's not the quarterback anymore. And the best pick is a guard in the 1st round who should be a great pick at number 11. And then you look at the rest of that draft, it's almost outside of a backup running back when Tajay Spears, who I like, it's not great. And this year's draft, you got Brownlee, Sweat, and Latham. All could be very good players. The rest has not contributed yet. The point is it hasn't contributed. It hasn't been productive. It hasn't yielded results. Yeah. That's what happened to John Robinson. That's what happened to Ran Carthon. And I don't think it's more complicated than that, even though behind the scenes, it's much more complicated than that.
Sure. And to put one more bow on this, another thing that they said on the record, and you guys know I prefer to talk about things that were on the record. One of the things that stood out to me from Brinker was saying that the goal is going to be drafting premium production at premium positions with premium picks. I'm not saying that is a shot at the previous regime, but if you think of somebody who builds roster out of the box and somebody who builds roster inside the box, using a 1st-round pick on a guard, using a 2nd-round pick on a defensive tackle, and using a 3rd-round pick on a running back, that's not necessarily premium positions. Those are positions you should be expected to be able to build later in the draft or through free agency or plugging spots. You use those early picks on the 5 positions that actually matter in modern football: quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, defensive end. The Titans have not drafted an edge rusher in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round since Harold Landry. Like, the team's bad at rushing the passer. They're not investing in it. The team has not picked a receiver that panned out since A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
It's, you look at the premium positions, the team is going more conventional. And I've talked about this before on the show. When you start doing what everybody else does, you got to play catch up, and you're going to be worse at it than the other people. And so that's where the patience part comes in of if the Titans decide to build a roster the same way that 29 other teams are doing it, they're not going to be the best at it. They're going to be 26th at it, 27th at it. It's going to be strange. But is that better than being the best at doing something that nobody else thinks is a good idea? I really don't know.
So a quick rule of thumb here, because I want to make sure we're clear on this. I am not sitting here saying that Chad Brinker is the right answer, that Chad Brinker is so good that they're going to win Super Bowls, that Titans fans should just blindly put their faith in Chad Brinker. That's not the case. I think you should treat all of these individuals the same way.
Yeah.
With an evaluating microscope that says, show me results. It's not personal. It's not about who you are as a person or your personality type. It's about results. And if Chad Brinker gets results, And this is what I like. If he doesn't get results, he will be fired too, just like John Robinson and Ran Carthon before him. Like that's the way this works. And I think, again, if you believe, and I think I've seen this so much and throughout the narratives, and it drives me just insane. So this is more of a media side of things, a media nugget here. If you believe that there are folks who are, quote, carrying water or peddling the story, because Chad Brinker was out there all week this week, you included, talking to folks to try to convey the message and answer questions. That's in fact, that's what a general manager is supposed to do. Communicate with the press and the people who cover the team to explain to the fans what's actually happening. If you believe that there are people who are, quote, like on that side of this equation, like I consider myself down the middle, which is a guy lost his job for not doing a great job. Another guy's going to get a chance and he could lose his job for not doing a great job. And Callahan could lose his job if he doesn't do a good job. And Will Levis lost his job because he didn't do a good job. That's the way the world works. If you believe that there's messaging happening from the team to try to spin this from a PR standpoint, you're right. I bet you that's what they're doing because that's their job. But don't tell me it's not also happening on the other side of the equation. If one person can leak information and tell a story and try to message and PR and spin, then so can Ran Carthon. And so can his camp, and so can Anthony Robinson, and so can the other people that got fired out of security and out of team ops and everything else. Everybody has sources in the media, and they can float things, and they can tell stories, and they can do all the stuff they want to. Vrabel did the same thing after he was fired. He probably backdoored to Diana Rossini and Rex Schroeder, whatever. Like that's all hypothetical there. But like, if one side can message, so can the other. So why wouldn't they both be messaging, and why wouldn't both messages be in favor of their side of the story? Like, that's something that everyone needs to just make sure they understand.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't care about media dynamics.
Oh, I do.
Like, I came onto this show and you're like, oh man, there was all this Twitter. I'm like, I didn't know that.
Well, it was just because people were, mad at me for having an opinion that I don't think this is a bad decision. I don't think this is a bad decision for the organization. And I don't think this decision somehow proves that the owner is dysfunctional. I think this is Steve Cavendish of the Nashville Banner told me one time, the first rule of holes, when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yes.
And that's the first rule of holes. And that's what I think this was. That doesn't excuse all the other dysfunctional decisions that they may or may not have made throughout the course of the last 24 months. I think you can separate the two. And that's all I think rational and smart people can do.
I like to hope so. Maybe I'm too diplomatic when it comes to discussing media squabbles for very rational reasons in my past, but I don't necessarily find too much productivity in trying to parse, who's loyal to this source and who's loyal to that source. No, and narrative is narrative.
I don't care about it either. I just want to point out the rule of engagement here, which is that everybody has the power to message. They all do. So let me give you why I think this is why I think it's a good decision.
Okay.
I told you guys on this, and it is primarily results. I don't think the moves have led to results. The team has gotten worse over the time that Ran Carthon was, quote, in charge. However, whatever percentage he's been in charge. Somebody asked me earlier in the comments, do I believe the Paul Kaharski report that he wrote a bunch of things about Ran in his story? I believe everything Paul Kaharski writes is accurate. I don't believe that what he wrote tells me a whole lot about whether or not I believe he did a good or bad job. Like, I sleep on planes. I don't think it's as big a deal as people think. But I don't think Paul writes anything that's not real. And I will speak to Paul because Paul's on this show. And so I'll talk about Paul. Everybody else, I don't care. I said on this show at the end of training camp last year, I was told from inside the organization that there was no collaboration happening. Ran Carthon was hired to collaborate. That's what he was hired. That was the pitch to all of us. That's what we were told. I was told at the end of camp, it's not happening. I said on this show, everyone needs to be asking questions about how collaborative the relationships are behind the scenes in the building. That's what I said on the show. By October, I was hearing that it was way worse, that it had gotten worse, that it was not working. And just like my 6 and 8-year-old, I said on this show, it's not one person's fault. If you are having communication issues inside of a company and two people can't work together, it's not one person's fault all the way. It's two people's fault. My 6 and 8 year old get in a fight. I don't care who started it. I don't care who did the most damage. The two of you are responsible for your relationship. It's a two-way street. And I said that on this show last October at the end, towards November. I started we need to have a conversation about what's actually happening from a relationship standpoint behind the scenes. Is this whole spiel that you've been selling us for 9 months actually working? And the answer was absolutely not. It wasn't. It wasn't working, and it led to Mike Vrabel being fired. That information didn't come out after Ran Carthon was fired.
Yeah.
Like, that part of this conversation has been out there for a while. And I have not heard anything that indicates that this, and again, I can't say with any certainty about any of the other characters in this. I cannot speak to Chad Brinker or Burke Nihill or anybody else that's involved in any of this. Amy Adams-Strunk, whatever. But the stories and the picture that was being painted behind the scenes was not what they were telling us. And the results have proved all of that out, that it wasn't working, that a person who's inexperienced wasn't making great decisions. And it doesn't mean he's not going to make great decisions down the road. It doesn't mean he can't be a great general manager somewhere else, but it wasn't working. And there's no results on the field that I can point to that says that's not true. Yeah. And guess who else agrees with me? The entire Tennessee Titans organization. Because you don't fire people that are doing a bang-up job. Like, rare. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but like rarely does in a meritocracy where winning matters. Rarely do you just say, this guy's doing such a great job, we got to fire him. Like, and not what happened.
Clean some stuff up in the comments, because I think people are misinterpreting the timeline Braden's talking about. Braden is talking about collaboration between Ran and Vrabel initially.
2023.
Yes. So that was reported quite a bit. I think we all talked about that. We're not specifically saying that Ran couldn't get along with Callahan or Brinker. That is not necessarily what is being discussed right now.
Right. What I'm saying is that there's it is super complicated. Like, it's very complicated. And thank you for that, Nick. I do appreciate it. I was told in August of 23, hey, this isn't like what they're telling you is happening is not happening. And later that year, I was told it was reaching a boiling point. I mean, those are my words. And that I think it's pretty obvious that happened. And the picture that has been painted from inside and outside the organization is not one of collaboration. It's not one of relationship building. It's not like, and ultimately, if you look at the decisions, the results of the decisions, it is hard to point to anything that says that story, that picture that was painted is untrue. And so I want to be clear. None of this means that Chad Brinker is going to do a great job. None of this means that Brian Callahan is going to be a great coach. Fans and Titans fans should be extremely critical and extremely skeptical of everyone that's in charge right now. But I think you can separate that from evaluating an individual who didn't do a great job. It's just, I don't think it's more complicated than that. And I don't think it's personal. I think inside the building, there's probably more personal stuff going on than that's just like human nature, right? But I don't think outwardly that this decision was much more than what you said originally to start the show, which is the team progressively got worse in almost every possible way. And the drafts and the free agents didn't work. They didn't solve the problem. And if you're not doing a great job, it's easy to say, look, that piece is not working. It's not personal, but we got to get somebody else in here to try. And it doesn't mean that Brinker's going to do a good job either.
No. So. And we can get into, if anyone cares, the logic of how long is too long or how short is too short to give somebody a chance.
I totally agree.
Like, was the problem all along messaging? If they had come out 12 months ago and said what Brinker said this week of, it's going to take some time, we need patience, this isn't going to be built overnight, instead of saying, oh, we're going to be competitive this year and we checked every box and all the stuff that you've heard us complain about in the last couple of weeks. Had they come out and preached patience and preached a rebuild and called it a rebuild, would people be this angry? Would people have lost their jobs? I really don't know. I tend to not think so. I think people are at least accepting of the fact that if you come out and say, hey, this is going to be bad, and then it's bad, people are going to be less angry. They'll be angry in the moment. They'll be like, oh, don't tell me this is going to suck. But if you tell somebody it's going to suck and then it sucks, at least there's cushion. And so if we're saying the issue all along was that the results were bad and people didn't think the results were bad, then one of two things happened. Either they genuinely believed the results were going to be good and they were wrong, in which case I get why you fire people who can't evaluate talent. Or the second thing was they thought this might be bad. They didn't want the backlash of admitting it. And then somebody lost their job for it. And it's probably a mix of both. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's all one or all the other, but look, football's not as complicated as we make it out to be sometimes.
Good player equal good football.
Yeah.
I do think that I think a lot, to your point, it's like we care too much, but not enough about the messaging sometimes, right? Like I think Amy Adams-Strunk has not done herself any favors by sort of putting in these ultimatums in her messaging.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this person is perfect for this, and this person's going to be great at that, and I can't wait for this. I also sort of think that like it's must-lie situations. Like Brian Callahan has to say all these positive things about Will Levis until he's not the starting quarterback anymore. Like that, you can't, like, that's just how messaging and life in the public sphere works. Like, it's the same with politics. It's the same with everything. It's must-lie situation. Everyone needs to think that the Titans love Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Like, it doesn't matter what they actually think of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Everyone needs to think that they do. From now until the day that they're on the actual first round of the draft, everyone needs to believe that they are in love with those two quarterbacks and that those two quarterbacks are better than everybody else in the draft. That's their goal.
And go ahead and float that you love Jalen Milroe. And go ahead and float that you love Carson Beck. Like, I
love Jalen Milroe.
Tell everybody that you love everybody. And it took us 32 minutes to mention the Titans have the number 1 pick in the draft. This is our first show, my first show, your second, since the Titans earned the number 1 pick in the draft. And we just spent 32 minutes talking about Palace intrigue. And I know it's interesting. I'm not trying to denigrate people for finding this interesting, but we're spending so much time looking back on things that people are disagreeing about if somebody liked somebody. But like, guys, this should be fun, right? Like, there's going to be a new GM, whether it's Chad Brinker or whoever Chad Brinker hires, whatever you want to call it.
Chad Brinker is the GM in actuality.
Whatever you want to call the titles, there will be new people deciding a very, very important factor for the future of the Tennessee Titans. And I know we have 4 months to talk about it, and I don't need to rush to it, but like, guys, sound off in the comments. Do you want us to keep talking about this drama? What do we want to do?
Nick, we have like 14 shows before the first pick.
I know.
We got a lot of shows.
What else can we say?
Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue.
What else can we say other than like, yeah, he got fired. Titans were bad.
I know. And this is why I appreciate doing the show with you, because you're going to kind of come into it and be like, well, guys, like, this is what it is. Let's move on. I enjoy the stuff that's hard to, I want to get it. First of all, I think Titans fans deserve to know, number one, because the ownership, like, you can be critical of Robert Kraft very easily, but Robert Kraft did something similar to his head coach this year, although less time, 1 year versus 2 years for Ran. And what he did is he stepped to the podium and he owned it. He said, everything is on me. It's my decision. Be critical of me, ask questions of me, and I'll answer questions. It's a hard thing to do. But because Amy Adams-Strunk won't do it, and I'm not saying that the owner is obligated to, but I would prefer it. But until, like, every time we do this, it's messaging, it's leaks, it's back channel discussions, it's sources say, it's so-and-so out of market, it's so-and-so in market. Both sides of this argument, whoever was inside the palace fighting, they both have their ability to get their messages out, and the owner doesn't step up and say, you know, this is what happened. And I know that's hard to do, and sometimes you can't tell the whole truth. Must-lie situations, right? To Stoney's point here, it's like, are we comfortable saying Brian Callahan is safe at this point? You know, Stillman reported that Chad Brinker didn't want Brian Callahan. Who knows? Who knows? Here's my impression, just like we've said for Ran and for J-Rob and for everybody else. If they're not good, people are going to be in trouble. Like, that's it. If they don't get better, the coach will take the blame because he's the coach. If they don't get better roster, then Chad Brinker will take the blame because he's largely in charge of the roster. I don't care what Brian Callahan says at a press conference about how collaborative everything is. People are in charge. And Brian Callahan has been here less time than the other two. So I think we know less about Brian Callahan. If they decide to move on him because that's not who Chad Brinker wants, okay, let's evaluate the next guy the same way we'd evaluate the current guy. And if Brian Callahan gets a shot, let's evaluate him the same way. Is the team getting better?
Yeah.
Are the players getting better? Is the offense better? Are they winning games? Is there more talent on the team? That's how we evaluate these guys.
And
all of them.
To the experience point, because I know this has come up a lot with both Ran and Brian. Look, the idea of go get an experienced general manager is something that NFL teams don't tend to do. Of the 31, or I guess 30 now, active general managers in the NFL, 2 of them are getting their second shot. 28 of them are doing it for the first time. The 2 that got second shots this year were Trent Baalke and Tom Telesco. They went a combined 8 and 28, and both ended up with their head coaches being fired. Contrast, I believe there are 7 retread head coaches in the NFL, and 5 of them are in the playoffs right now.
Ooh.
So there is a slight difference here.
Not Mike McCarthy.
No, Mike McCarthy and Raheem Morris missed the playoffs, but you have Andy Reid, you have Jim Harbaugh.
There's a lot of them.
A lot of retread coaches are retreads because they're very good at being coaches. The fact is, if somebody loses a job for being a bad GM, they almost never get a second shot. Some do. I'm not saying it's nothing, but in the modern NFL, very few people get a second shot at being a GM. A lot of people get a second chance at being a head coach. And I don't exactly understand why that is the case, but we've spent a lot of time talking about experience. And we've spent a lot of time talking about hiring coaches and GMs on the same cycle and groupthink with that. I don't know if any of this actually matters. If you're good at the job, you're going to be good at the job. And that's what we're trying to see. Is this guy good at the job? We'll see next year, probably.
So this is ultimately how I kind of wanted to wrap this up, because I wrote it all down last night as I was falling asleep, and I was like, man, I got to figure out a way to what's the right way to sort of succinctly illustrate this. And that is, none of you will give a shit if Chad Brinker is great. Not one of you will care, nor any of you should care about how we got here and about who made decisions and who did what and who did what. If Chad Brinker is awesome at his job, none of you will give a shit. That's it. And none of you should care, because you have a good GM making good decisions. That's it. I'm not saying that's going to happen. We're all going to find out together. But none of you care. None of you will care, nor none of you should you care about how we got to this situation if the right person gets to the top and is in the right role.
Oh, sure.
That's it.
If Brinker goes out and trades the number 1 pick for a big haul, or if he goes out and signs T. Higgins or something, we're going to see all of these AI edits of drinks for Brinks, just like we saw Let Ran cook. And it's going to be all of these clinking champagne glasses. Something like that is going to happen because people want to be excited about something. So if a good thing happens, if an exciting thing happens, get excited.
Here's mine. Brinker, Tinker, Sanders, cry. That's mine. Don't draft Sanders is the point of that. No, I agree. That's the internet moves so effing fast. It forgets about something. Our news cycle is now 36 hours. Nobody look at our country. Nobody cares what happened 3 years ago, much less 3 weeks ago. It's not a thing. All that matters is results. And nobody think about the other thing we do in this country too. We are willing to put up with, as human beings, in particular with sports, with music, with politicians, with movies, with actors. We are willing to put up with incredible human flaws for talent. Mm-hmm. It's been what we've done in this country forever. We don't care that you threw your girlfriend on a pile of AK-47s if you can rush the passer, Dallas Cowboys. No one cares. And I'm not saying not no one, but we generally overlook flaws and warts and how people got a job or how somebody did this, or maybe he's not a great guy or whatever. And I'm not even saying that about anybody at all. I'm just saying in general, you can shred the guitar. I don't care what you did in your personal life. You create brilliant art on TV. Don't care what you did in your personal life. You can win 6 national championships. Don't care what you do, how you treat recruits. Don't care. And I think in general, that's how people act. And if Chad Brinker is great at his job, how is this not an insanely good decision? If he's bad at his job, this will be a bad decision. I don't know how that relates. You can also talk about Ran in a different conversation. Ran wasn't doing his job well, so they moved on. And that's it.
Yeah. One of the things I say in my personal life all the time, which I will apply to football here too, is no matter how much anxiety you're feeling, no matter how much angst you are feeling about any situation revolving around another person, you have to let that person be the asshole. Like,
Yeah.
if you are like, oh man, I don't want to do this, they're going to react bad. Do it. They're going to react bad.
Yeah.
Like, let them be the jerk. Like, I'm not saying, oh, give everybody a chance. This is a meritocracy, but like, by the virtues of, you have gotten to a point where you're one step away from being a general manager. You have merit. Let them do it. And if they do it badly, punish them for doing it badly.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm not.
This is a very smart and very normal political strategy. There's a phrase like "give the other side enough rope to hang themselves," which maybe it's out of off color now these days or whatever. But like that is a very real strategy in politics. Let the other side make all the mistakes, and then we'll just come in and win the election. And that's very common.
And it's worse when it's your own side. Like, letting your own side fail for the sake of proving they can't do it. You don't want to fail. You never want to fail. But like, if you don't give somebody the chance to prove you right or prove you wrong, all you're doing is making up in your head what you think is going to happen. And what you think is going to happen isn't guaranteed to happen.
Yep.
So if you're sitting here right now and thinking, oh, Brinker's going to fail, and he does fail, okay. If you're sitting here thinking Brinker is going to succeed and he does succeed, okay. But if you're thinking something and it ends up being wrong, well, you just got proved wrong. Some things are going to happen. We spent 8 weeks yelling at each other about, you don't play the games on paper for the college football playoff. Don't play the GM job on paper. Like,
yeah. Which leads us to the number one pick by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I said this on Monday. I mean, look, here's I think at the end of the day, my ultimate opinion, and this is not the opinions of Nick Suss, the Tennessean, or Full 40 Sports, or anyone else that works on the network, is that I cannot find outwardly through results or inwardly through information that Ran Carthon was doing a good job. That's it. And my opinion is, if someone's not doing a good job, you need to change that role. I think that's the case for every company in America. I don't think it's personal, and I don't think he's a bad guy at all, and I don't think his career's over. So number one pick in the draft. I said this on Monday, and I've come to this. I've landed on this, I think, throughout the entire course of the season, but especially as the Texans were winning on Sunday, that there is only one player worth taking at number one. There's only one, and his name is Travis Hunter, and he does make the team better. He doesn't fill an immediate need, but he's a great football player that would be an asset to the team winning games in the future. And if you listen to Chad Brinker and some of the messaging he's been distributing this week, and you said it, I think almost everything he said makes sense, is totally fine. And some of it does sort of reek of this wasn't happening to some degree, which is we want guys who are obsessed with ball, and we need 7, game-changing players at premium positions. Like, a lot of that stuff does sound like there's a little bit of a veiled shot at the previous, it ran. But Travis Hunter is one of those guys. He's a game-changing difference maker at one, probably a second position, which is punt returner, and maybe a third position on the other side of the ball, depending on where he lands. That is the only player that is worth being taken with the number one pick, in my opinion. Reaction.
Let's do a really, really brief geek. Really, really brief.
We need a music drop for this.
We say that every week. I'm never going to do it.
All right. It's kind of my job, actually.
This will be the 22nd time in the last 50 years that a first-year GM will earn the number one pick. That the number one pick was inherited by a first-year GM. So, of the previous 21, how many do you think drafted quarterbacks?
Oh, okay. 0.
QBs?
You said how many? You said 21
of the previous 21 first-year GMs who had the number one pick. How many do you believe drafted?
Oh, okay. It's the other way. 19.
Okay. How many do you think traded the pick?
I mean, I have no idea. I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay. So, of the previous 21, 9 drafted quarterbacks.
Okay.
6 traded the pick.
Fine. You made me look stupid.
And that left 6 to do anything else. We have 15 out of 21 either draft a quarterback or trade the pick.
So non-quarterbacks drafted at number one with 21-year first-year GMs. 6 of them were non-quarterbacks.
Yes. And if you want the list of non-quarterbacks, it
Oh
is
yeah, go.
Eric Fisher, Kansas City. Jake Long, Miami. Mario Williams, Houston. We have George Rogers back in 1981 for New Orleans. We have Tom Cousineau back in 1979 for Buffalo. And we have Hall of Famer Leroy Selman back in 1976.
So three modern ones.
Yeah,
so
Mario Williams, Eric Fisher. Yeah.
Only 3 times has what I'm suggesting happened. And by the way, Drayden says read the comment. So here you go. Take Hunter, sign Fields, and Hill because Hill is out. Here's the deal. I am not suggesting that that's what I think they should do.
He clearly means Taysom Hill, right?
Taysom Hill, yeah. This is not what I think they should do. I am saying there's only one human in this draft worth taking number 1 by anyone, in my opinion. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you go back through the list of people who have the last 2 times a team has directly traded the number 1 pick with a first-year GM, they have resulted in coincidentally drafting Hall of Fame running backs. So if you specifically
very random.
Derrick Henry and LaDainian Tomlinson were the Hulls the last 2 times it's happened.
I cannot wait for Ashton Genty.
So if the Titans can go turn Travion Henderson or somebody into a Hall of Fame running back off of this pick, fantastic.
Well, hang on. You said it was LT who was picked, I think, 5th, right, in the draft. Who was the other one?
Derrick Henry.
Okay, that's a second rounder. All right.
Yeah.
Ashton Genty is a top 5 prospect in this draft. He won't be drafted as such, but he is as good as at what he does as anyone else in this draft.
Yeah.
I would have Ashton Genty in my top 5. I would not take him in the top 5. That's different.
The quarterbacks, for what it's worth, the best ones to pan out: Troy Aikman, Jerry Jones's first draft in Dallas.
Okay.
Andrew Luck, Ryan Grigson's first draft in Indianapolis. That was kind of a obvious one. Vinny Testaverde, I believe, is on the list. Mostly it's people like Alex Smith, Baker Mayfield, Tim Couch, David Carr. Drew Bledsoe was a good quarterback.
Isn't Alex Smith better than Testaverde and Bledsoe?
Again, they're all people who, if you're talking about contributions to the team that drafted them, other than Aikman and probably Bledsoe, I don't know if you have too many like tip top ones.
I mean, Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck and Trevor Lawrence is another one who we don't know yet. But it pretty much comes down to what we already know about NFL drafts. Quarterbacks are a crapshoot. Like, if you pick a quarterback number 1 overall, there's no real reason why David Carr was that much better or that much worse than Vinny Testaverde, than Alex Smith, than all these names we're throwing out. Yeah. Are you in a year where there's a quarterback who's going to work? And I don't know. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this team handles it. Because, I'll use the example here of the 1997 New York Football Jets.
As one does.
New York Football Jets of 1997 had a first-year general manager named Bill Parcells. It really worked out, Bill Parcells with the Jets. They traded the number 1 pick to the St. Louis Rams, who drafted Hall of Famer Orlando Pace. The Jets ended up trading 4 more times over the course of 2 drafts and acquired James Ferrier and then 7 other people I haven't heard of.
Did James Ferrier go to Virginia? Is that right?
He might have.
Okay, continue.
So yeah, for every time you can say, oh, the Titans traded the number 1 pick and got Derrick Henry and Jack Conklin and Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith out of it. That's awesome. Or the Chargers traded the number 1 pick and moved back to get LaDainian Tomlinson and still ended up drafting Drew Brees later. Those are great, fantastic things. But trading back doesn't guarantee you to work, just like drafting a quarterback doesn't guarantee you to work. It's all going to come down to scouting and evaluation and development. And even then, some people are just more talented than others. And the Titans have the number 1 pick in a draft where we've talked about it. There aren't a lot of guys who are viewed as can't miss talents.
Yep. There's 1,000,000% no Orlando Pace in this draft.
Yeah.
There's 0 Orlando Paces in this draft. James Ferrier did, in fact, go to the University of Virginia. I'm a loser. And thus concludes Geek Corner when we start talking about where James Ferrier went to college. Some of you in the comments, Team Ramrod, I like Carter over Hunter. I think Carter fills a larger need and is equally as talented. I do think, and True Hype says, no, let me make sure I get this right. Raskuya says, I like getting Hunter. I don't think there's value that high unless you're sure he can play both ways. Positional value isn't good either way. I do believe that part of, my theory or anyone's theory evaluating Travis Hunter is that he's not an elite receiver and not an elite corner, but he's very, very, very good at football. And that's where I agree that some of it is that he is so dynamic that I think he automatically solves their punt return issues that they've had for like 10 years. I think there's tons of value. I think he actually is better for this team at receiver than he is at corner. I don't think he plays press man the way Denard Wilson wants him to. But I would not take a pick at number 1. And this is why I believe the Titans need to sell their obsession with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Because if they move down to 3, and in your theory, draft future Hall of Famer Ashton Genty, they're going to get a lot back in return that's going to help them build the roster for success, no matter who's the GM and no matter who's the coach. So clearly trade back is the right move here, whether that's to pick 3 to 4, 5, 7, whatever. Yeah, it's clearly the right move.
And just the plug, all of this got lost because it was published on Monday, but my manifesto is up, Tennessean.com. Let's fix the Tennessee Titans. I gave you a 7-step plan. Go check it out.
Did you adjust that after the news on Tuesday?
No, I wrote it expecting the news to be the news.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah. There was plenty of wind blowing on Monday. That's for sure. Which is, why we did the show we did. Anyway. Okay. So I think the number, like, I want to get to college football in a second, but I do believe that the Titans have to sell the quarterback angle for as hard as they can, trade back, get a bunch of picks. And I haven't read your story yet, so I don't want to give it all away. But go read it, Tennessean.com, pay a couple of bucks each month for good journalism. There's a lot of good stuff in this draft. Like, if you want edge players and you move back to 10, there's a lot of really good edge players at 10. I'm just throwing out numbers here, right?
And you can also go into the second round and they'll be like Jack Sawyer, JTT, Princely and Manley Mellon. Like, there are going to be guys. Yeah.
Yes, the front 7 is got some depth in this draft. The difference between pick 10 and pick 40, let's say, is not all that great. I don't think there's a huge gap at that position, the front 7. So if you were looking for an edge player, there's a lot of great defensive linemen. The Titans, obviously, it's one of the few positions they're not in the market for, but there's a lot of good edge players that are going to be available in the first round, late first round, whatever. The other thing you can do if you move back anywhere between 8 and 15, you're probably going to get one of Luther Burden, Tet McMillan, or Emeka Egbuka. I think all 3 of them are bona fide starters right away in the NFL. I think you can get Egbuka later, like 15 to 18, maybe even later than that. I think McMillan is solid. I think Luther Burden's the best. So if you move back to 3 and you're choosing between Hunter, Carter, and Burden, I think you get a bona fide starter with that pick no matter what on top of draft capital. So it's very clear that the trade back is the way to go. There's good edge talent in this draft in the teens, so you can move back pretty far the way Robinson did when I think he moved back to 12,
15
right?
Maybe
15, and then he moved back up to 8. So you don't have to do the move back up thing. You can just take the huge haul and hopefully draft a all-pro right tackle. No, I'm just kidding.
I was playing on a mock draft simulator yesterday, and I ended up getting 3 future 1s, 2 future 2s, and 2 future 3s just by screwing around with the Titans draft. Like, there are things you can do.
Yeah. Move back to 12 and take James Pierce. Move back to 12 and take Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. Move back to 12, you might get Michael Williams out of Georgia. Move back to 12, you've got good edge talent available right there in that early teens, late 10s. You could also get a right tackle at that time. I don't think that's, like, from a PR standpoint, I don't think the Titans can do that. Like, 3 straight offensive linemen in the top 15, not going to go over well with the fan base. However, there are worse strategies to building your team for a new quarterback, whoever that might be, stepping in.
There are also better strategies.
I agree. And there's a lot of comments about Tyler Warren. I agree. I'm obsessed with Tyler Warren too. Like, I think he's great. I think he's more of like an 18 to 20 kind of guy. Like, he's more in that range. Colston Loveland out of Michigan, also a very good tight end prospect. I'm on top of it. I'm into the draft this year, babe. Number 1 pick. I'm there.
In the last 10 years, I believe there's only one Super Bowl champion that didn't have, like, Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski or George Kittle. Like, the teams that make the Super Bowl tend to have very good tight ends. So I get the obsession.
That's been the Packers' problem all along. Now we have Tucker Kraft. Let's go.
But also, the teams that had Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce tended to have Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. So causation, correlation.
Dallas. How about Dallas Clark? You could throw Dallas Clark in there.
Sure.
Keith Miller for the 2 Steelers championships.
There's a reason I said last 10 years, Braden. If you just want to name teams that won Super Bowls, yeah, there was a
Those are elite tight ends, though. I'm just saying. That's why the Falcons didn't win. I'm just kidding. I do want to go back and look at the correlation between elite tight ends and Super Bowl championships now. All right. Do you want to talk a little, like 6 minutes here of college football?
What game is on tonight? I truly don't remember.
I believe it's Penn State and Notre Dame. And I find it to be utterly fascinating from a narrative standpoint. Sinkers Beverages, by the way, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I think I have no idea who's going to win this game. I feel pretty comfortable picking Ohio State over Texas. I think both games are going to be really good. I think Penn State and Notre Dame are staring at each other, Spider-Man meme-ish. They're both very good in the front seven. They both have really good backfields that want to run the football. Quarterbacks who I do think that Titans fans should be paying attention to Drew Aller, at the Penn State quarterback. I think he's a guy that could be a first-round pick next year, or if he plays great tonight, could play his way into the conversation this year. If he decides to come back or come out, he said he's going to go back to college. There's a chance that decision could change. Side note, I meant to say this earlier, but I said it on Monday and I got a lot of flack for it. I would take Jalen Milroe over the other two, but not until like the late 20s, early 30s, maybe second round. I think Jalen Milroe, if you built a system around him, if they fire Brian Callahan and go hire Todd Monken, I think you can run a Jalen Milroe offense. It needs to be Philadelphia-esque. I don't think you can do it with Brian Callahan, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, where are you at with Penn State Notre Dame? Physicality, defense. I don't trust James Franklin.
I have spent the last 2 months, telling everybody in the world who will listen that the two teams that people should be afraid of are Ohio State and Notre Dame. So these last couple of weeks have been pretty validating for my ability to talk ball. I still think Notre Dame is the superior team right now. I think they have belief in what's going on as a team, as an organization. Was looking something up. There's something that'll happen in a few minutes.
Well, you want to go ahead and break it here?
I will not.
Oh, come on.
But yeah, I think that Notre Dame.
Brian Callen's getting fired?
No. I think that Notre Dame, I like the way Marcus Freeman has his guys playing. I think that they have fully bought into a system that relies on the way that they have to play all for one, all that togetherness stuff that I normally don't love talking about. They exemplify it. And
building
I like
beneath
that.
The surface?
Yes.
I agree. I think the reason Notre Dame is here is because of Marcus Freeman. And I think the reason Penn State might not make it any further is because of James Franklin. I think otherwise they're very even teams. It's very difficult to sort of find daylight between the two. Who even wins individual matchups is hard. I think Aller's slightly better than Leonard, but Leonard's very gamey, can be an athlete. The backfields, the offensive lines, the defenses. I don't know if Abdul Carter's going to play. I don't know unless there's news on that. I don't know if you've seen any news. I assume he's not going to play. And so we'll see what happens. But I would take Notre Dame as well because of the head coach. I do think Texas plays better than people think in the game against Ohio State because Vegas says it's like a 6-7 point spread. Ohio State has crushed people. I do think Texas plays much better. But I think Ohio State wins. Just no one will beat Ohio State. Ryan Day's sacrificing a child after the Michigan game will work, and they will win a national championship. So
they're very good at football, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
They're very good at doing what they do.
James Franklin said that Abdul Carter's going to play. Okay, keep an eye on that. They might need him to win the game.
I like Riley Leonard though. I have nothing to back this up other than vibes, but he does remind me a little bit of Jake Browning. Just vibes.
Really? Okay.
Just a guy who played college football forever, who's going to be an NFL backup, and in 4 years after being a backup, he's going to start some games like, oh yeah, he's pretty good. I like him.
You're not talking like a totally different skill set. Like
skill set, no. Like the vibes of he'll be an NFL backup for 3 or 4 years, and people are like, why is this guy in the league? He's never played. And then he'll play, and it's like, oh, I get it. Yeah, that's fair.
How did Chase Daniel play 9 years in the NFL? There's something to guys who play a lot of college football, and Riley Leonard has played a lot of college football in various areas of the country. No, he's a really fun player. Not going to complete a lot of passes tonight, but I bet you he picks up a few first downs on the ground that just make you go, whoa, that was fun. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll take Ohio State and Notre Dame to play in the national championship game, which, by the way, as a quick side note to all you Southern football fans, who I'm assuming most of you are, ESPN, their bias is towards money. And you know how they make a lot of money? Ohio State versus Notre Dame. Not two SEC schools. Ohio State versus Notre Dame would make them a ton of money because people would watch. Some people would hate watch, but a lot of people would watch. So who's getting fired, Nick? Come on.
Nobody, actually. That's not what's happening.
How does Colt Anderson still have his job?
I mean, there will be staff changes eventually. That's
Right.
just not what I'm talking about right now.
Ah, okay. So Titans have signed a contract with Shedeur Sanders. Wasn't it Mario Williams that signed a contract like 4 days before the draft?
There were a couple of them in that era. I think Matthew Stafford had one before the
Really?
draft. That's why they had to change the CBA with draft stuff.
Yeah. Well, that and you can't pay Jamarcus Russell $75 million.
Correct.
Can't do that. All right. What else you got coming up on the Tennessean right now for Titans fans?
Well, there's a general manager search happening, whether you guys think it's for a general manager or not. So a lot about that.
An assistant general manager in name only is what the search is. It doesn't. Not a lot of SEO optimization in that title, though. So we'll see. Titans search for general manager. I would expect someone from Green Bay to be the pick. That's what I would expect.
That would make sense.
Yep. And not for, I don't necessarily mean this means anything, but the person who's the biggest supporter of Chad Brinker's, Matt LaFleur.
Likes Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur's pretty good at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if he has good opinions about front office people. We'll see. We're all going to learn together. All right. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Rate, review, subscribe on the podcast app of choice. That means you scroll to the bottom, you click 5 stars, and then you write a little blurb in there, and then people find the show. So if you think we give you good Titans coverage and you think we cover the stuff the right way, please do so. Thumbs up and notifications turned on the YouTube page, 440 Sports. Go to Tennessean.com, pay for good journalism. And, of course, eat the best brisket in the city at Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, and but all of your alcohol and non-alcoholic and THC beverage needs for the month of January, of course, at Sinkers Beverages right there in East Nashville, 4-time liquor store of the year. It's about results. It's a meritocracy, Nick, and Sinkers Beverages has won 4 straight championships. No one's getting fired. So there you go. For Nick, I am Braden. Thank you for listening. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Have a great weekend. Playoff football. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.